Hi, my name is Dr. Angela Winter and with Horn and More, and I am here with Dr. Michael Walker, who's this associate professor of horn at the University of New Mexico and the founding member of Amity Trio. Um, Mike, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, I've known Mike for a while, and I know him as a wonderful horn player, a wonderful colleague. But I met him through performances of him and his wife, Katie Dukes Walker, who's a soprano, and got to know their trio. Kimberly Carballo is the pianist for the group, and they couldn't be here unfortunately. But Mike's going to talk to us about their group, and I think that their trio is really exciting. I love the work that they do. They are wonderful musicians. Please check out their album Between Us Now. You can find it on Spotify. Their music is really inspiring, but also the mission of the group is inspiring, and also just the way that they have been a sustainable group is great. So, Mike, the name Amity means friendship. Can you tell us a little bit about the group?
Yeah, for sure. We were all friends. And as we were we had done a few different, long story short, I guess. So it actually started with Katie and Kim, who met when I was doing my doctorate at Indiana. And so Katie was singing in an opera company with Kim called Reimagining Opera for Kids. And they loved collaborating with one another and they really hit it off. And I just knew Kim as a friend. She's on faculty at Indiana University, and she at the time was in the collaborative piano department and opera coaching department. Now she's running now she's running their virtual academy, which is a whole nother conversation for another time. Anyways, so Katie and Kim were really good friends, and I just was friends with Kim as well. And then when I started the job here at University of New Mexico, I had to go back and finish my doctorate, which meant more recitals. And so because I was teaching full time, I was like, oh, I need someone to play a recital on like a day's notice because I had to fly out there on like a Friday and do rehearsal and then a recital for all these requirements, you know? And so Katie was like, you should ask Kim. She's amazing. And I was like, sure. I was like, Kim, you want to play a recital of really hard music? We'll have a total of one rehearsal. She was like, great. And so I flew out there, and then it was just, chamber music chemistry. And it was really fun collaborating with her. And that was it. I graduated, I moved on, and that was way back in 2014. At the time, Katie and I were working with a chamber music festival in southern Italy, and we needed a pianist. And this was in 2015 or 16, I can't remember. So we brought Kim out and we collaborated again. And at that time, we had commissioned a piece for soprano, horn, and piano from a composer that we knew, just so we had something to perform with Katie and I. And so when we played it with Kim, it was just like, ooh, this is really fun. And we want to do more of this. And so we were all really good friends. And so we decided to like make it official, right? Do you want to form a trio with me? Yeah. Do you want to form a trio with me? It was really cute. So, and we were all friends. And so we called it Amity Trio. And so we officially became a 501c3 nonprofit organization in 2018. And that's when we really started focusing on the trio as like a viable option for music making and part of our careers. And then we just sort of have been doing it ever since.
Well, I think that a lot of us in school, we play in chamber groups together, whether that's a woodwind quintet or a brass quintet or something else. And then we kind of don't know how to take that maybe to the next step. And that's one thing I really like is that you all took it to the next step. I also like that your trio has a really focused mission and sort of a common goal. Could you tell us a little bit about that, the mission of the trio?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I want to read the whole thing, but you should check it out. It's on amitytrio.com. But when we formed as a trio, we wanted to be focused on a unified vision. Like anybody can form any combination of instruments, and it could be a thing. Like I always use the story of the woodwind quintet. It was not a thing until Rika wrote a lot of music for the woodwind quintet. Then all of a sudden, a brand new like chamber ensemble that's very common was formed. And so we wanted to be focused not necessarily on just the fact that it was soprano, horn, and piano, but something that was mission focused. And so what we all really had a shared vision of was uplifting music of historically excluded composers. And we really loved working with living composers. And so a large part of our trio is working with living composers, collaborating with them, and uplifting music of underrepresented composers. And with that, we formed our board to keep us mission focused. And I think that's been like the biggest lesson in terms of having a chamber ensemble, especially if it's like a non-traditional ensemble. To keep it moving forward, I think you have to have like a shared vision. And that's a great thing about being a nonprofit organization because our board is amazing and they help us make sure that we're doing that mission on a regular basis.
So that, I mean, I think that that's wonderful and that's exciting. That sounds, is that, this is going to be a dumb question or a basic question. You're a professor at an institution, so of course I'm thinking that of course you can make that happen. But is that hard to do? Is that something that a freelance musician could do, or maybe even somebody in their master's or an undergraduate could do? Was becoming a nonprofit, like, was that hard to do? Is that, or is that an actionable step?
No, it's yeah, I mean, I don't know, complicated answer. Yes, it's hard to do, but it's not impossible. And I think like it's so important for musicians nowadays to have a really good like entrepreneurial mentality and like figuring out the steps that you need to go about doing it. There's so much like knowledge out there, right? Like you could YouTube University is like a real thing. I mean, you could YouTube how to start a nonprofit, and you just will figure it out as you go. Luckily, that my two colleagues who are not here are incredible entrepreneurs. So Kim is, I can't even remember the number now, but I think she's been a part of like founding about 8 nonprofits. And of course, Katie is has done the same thing. She ran a company back when we were in Bloomington and started the nonprofit and the whole 9 yards. So yeah, there's they've had a lot of experience, and so they really helped like put it all together. And so it's not impossible. I think it just takes a while. It's more of a time thing.
How do you go about finding, I know a little bit of some of the composers that you've worked with, like Noor Slim, you've introduced me to her music. And I know that you've done quite a few projects with her. How do you go about reaching out to composers or finding people that you'd like to work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if you think about all the people that you know in your network, there's probably a few composers in there. And if you don't know composers, then you probably know some other, you know, French horn players who collaborate a lot with composers. And so you just go with people who know of other people is a good way to start. But I think when we were focusing on building like relationships with various composers, it was really focused on what like we need, what area of expertise we needed to fill, or what kind of music we wanted to figure out. So our first album is called Between Us Now, and it's all music by North American women composers. And so some of it's like not new. Like Amy Beach is a very well-known composer who has
Florence
incredible
Price.
music.
Well,
Yeah, and Florence Price, and they're not with us anymore, right? But like we still love their music, and we wanted to like uplift it because not enough people know how awesome Amy Beach is, right? Um, and so that was the easier one because the pieces are really well known songs, but there's a version with violin obligato, and so for the album we just transcribed the violin obligato to French horn, and then Kim helped write another horn part for the other 2 songs, and then we completed the set. And so when we had that, we were looking for what kind of composers would really fill this out nicely. We had been working with Nurse Slim for a while. She's actually our composer in residence. And so we've worked with her, I don't know, it's been 4 years now, I guess, and in a lot of different capacities. So we know what kind of music she's going to write. And so we were like, well, what else could we put on this album that would really fill this kind of thing, you know? And like as a trio for soprano, horn, and piano, a lot of our music is like slow and pretty, you know, because singers love to sing slow and pretty, and horn players, we obviously do the same thing. And so we really wanted like high energy music or something that really explored different colors. And so we looked in our network of people, and we have a whole like Google Doc list of composers we want to collaborate with. That's like way too long. Like we will never collaborate with all these composers. But it's also really inspiring that there's so many incredible composers out there. So after that, you just reach out and you just start talking to them, you know, and see if it's a good connection, if like you can come to a good understanding. And you know, finding the money to commission the composers is probably the trickiest element. But through a lot of grant writing and fundraising, we do that. We write a contract, and there you go.
So I do think that that's one thing that sort of is intimidating for a lot of people is just, your first step. So it sounds like first step is finding your who you want. And then the second step's also extremely intimidating is like how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to do it? You mentioned grant writing. Is there I know this isn't a quick answer and you mentioned YouTube University, which I think is a great place to figure out a lot of things, but if someone let's say you did have someone that you know or a friend of yours that you wanted to work with, but what would be a first step to finding to trying to find funding for something like that?
That's a hard one to answer unless you know the specifics. Grant writing is a huge part of like how we function as a trio, and I mean, I don't know. We're also lucky, right? So Kim has a lot of experience doing grant writing, and Katie is the director of the Arts Leadership and Business program. So at University of New Mexico, and so she teaches all these classes on entrepreneurship. So it's like definitely in their wheelhouse to do a lot of this grant writing, and so we just have regular grant writing sessions, and so we usually identify what possible grants are out there. And so recently we did win a grant. It was maybe a couple years ago through the city of Albuquerque, and so it was about helping artists do a wide variety of things. And so because it was so flexible, we could use it for doing some commissions or some live performances. But I think you just have to kind of look in your network of where you are. If you're a student, like I know at University of Mexico, we have a lot of grants for students we have a lot of grants for students that can pay for travel, that can pay for collaborating with composers, recording, all that stuff. So it just depends where you are. And then I think it's writing a lot of grants and being rejected a lot and learning from that and getting better and refining it and refining it. And so now we have a really I don't know, pretty specific process of what we're looking for. And our projects are very long reaching. And so like our the album Between Us Now, we were grant writing for that for 3 or 4 years. And so we had lots of prose that we would refine every single time, right? So we apply for a grant and it has a word limit of 500 words for like, what is this about? And then the next one is 200 words. So how do you take what you wrote in 500 words and reduce it down to 200 words and then expand it back out? And so we're constantly tweaking our grant writing skills and also like the actual narrative to make sure that it's always competitive.
Now I know, so you and Katie Dukes Walker are married, and so you obviously hope. I guess I shouldn't say obviously. It's probably hard to find time between the two of you, but rehearsing between the two of you logistically, you're in the same zip code. And then Kimberly though does not live in Albuquerque. Can you speak a little bit about how you all rehearse and just we going maybe from the logistic or the business side of things to the artistic side? How do you artistically make it work with you all living in different locations?
Yeah, that's a good point. So pre-COVID, we would just get together like a week or two before the concerts and then have rehearsal, like intensive periods, and then we would put on the show. And like I said, we had really good chemistry, and that's why we wanted to make the trio a thing. We really enjoy collaborating with one another. So when COVID happened, we started researching other possibilities, and there was a program back then called Jack Trip. And so I mean, the issue with like doing something on Zoom, even though you and I are both in New Mexico right now, like we couldn't play horn duets because the latency of Zoom is like several seconds, right? And so there's a program that uses who knows what technology, but it reduces the latency down to a number of milliseconds. And so then it's just like being like way in the back part of the orchestra with that really particular conductor who says, "Horns, you're late, you're late, you're late." And so you just have to anticipate more and more and more. It sort of feels like that. And so it's audio only. The program was really finicky and it took like 3 months to even get it set up. And we had to get recording equipment. So I had to learn how to use an interface. I had to learn how to use microphones. We had to make sure it was hooked up to Ethernet connection. And you can't just have any Ethernet cable. You have to have like a good Ethernet cable, right? So like it took a long time before we even were able to like actually do these types of rehearsals. But we've been doing them ever since. And now the technology is sort of caught up. There's another program that's really user friendly called Far Play. It's a free program online. And we like usually rehearse once a week through this program. And so the benefit is that it is really low latency. It's not perfect, and you are controlling like the different levels, and you're hearing yourself. You're basically recording yourself the entire time. and you can't rely on the visual cues. You can only rely on oral cues. And so when you're learning music, like there's sometimes it's great. It makes it a tighter ensemble for sure, but it's also really tricky for certain pieces. And so we've come like some of Noor's music is like has a lot of jazz rhythms. It's really fast and it just doesn't work. Like it's so hard that we can't rehearse like effectively on jack trip or far play. And so we sort of saved those for another time. And so, but for from 2020 to 2024, that's almost all we did. It was exclusively rehearse like through that digital platform. You learn a lot about recording and like playing with your colleagues in different ways. But now we're trying to do a sort of a combination of it. And so what we've done recently is we did some grant writing, and then we flew Kim out, and we just had a rehearsal week. And so we wrote a bunch of grants. We did some strategic planning, and then we had rehearsals um, twice a day, for 3 or 4 days, and then off they go. And so the next time we're going to get together, we're doing a tour in Mexico City for about 10 days. And we rehearsed for that. So we'll probably have 1 or 2 rehearsals on far play before we go, but then one in-person rehearsal, and then we're off for the tour. So yeah, it's tricky when you don't live in the same place. We talked to a lot of other groups who were doing similar things. And there was a saxophone quartet that would record each part. And so like the bari sax would go first with a click track. They would record whatever the piece they were working on. It would be sent to the tenor sax player, who then overlays their part to the bari sax part, so on and so forth. Then when you're done, you have a complete like 4-part track of the saxophone quartet. So you can say, oh, I want to like play that part with the bari. So you mute the other tracks, and you can do that. So there's lots of ways that you can figure out how to make it work. You just have to be creative and find out what works for you.
I think that's one of the things, we were all scrambling during the pandemic. If people remember that time, trying to find ways to make music safely. And it wasn't ideal and it's not perfect and nothing replaces playing together. But I think there were a lot of things that can be used in tandem with, that can make in-person rehearsing maybe more efficient and more effective. And I think now we're in this really sweet spot where we learned a lot during that time we can sort of apply it to our traditional models of rehearsing that we were used to before. And I think that's really exciting actually, because then you can get together for a brief amount of time and make quite a bit of headway. So I love that. And you mentioned the two that you mentioned were free jack and fair play. Is that correct?
No, it was far play,
Far play, sorry.
FARPLAY, and then jack trip.
Dyslexia is fun. So far play and jack trip. Cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's all.
Cool. All right. Great. Well, I know I'm going to check some of those things out because I do a lot of that sort of rehearsing myself. Good. It sort of feels like it's what I love about this is it just sort of it's I think that we're used to when we're in school, we see people every day, we rehearse maybe every week, and then that's a real luxury. And if you require that luxury to continue to make music, I think that that can be a little bit limiting. And I love the nature of your group because you are able to make a lot of headway and do a lot of exciting projects without the luxury of living in the same place or meeting once a week. And I think it's a great example.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to be in a chamber ensemble, it has to be nimble, right? Like that's the whole point of it.
Mhm.
Having an orchestra change how they rehearse is like a tall order, right? Like you can't just demand that like 100 musicians just do something differently. They've been doing it the same way. And so that's why we kind of wanted to keep it small, that we could modify the ensemble to fit various needs and really, you know, adapt to the very quickly changing, landscape of live performance.
Great. Well, okay, so Amity Trio, and I know where we can find. And your first album is Between Us Now, which is on Spotify. Um, uh, and I know that we can find you. You've got a beautiful website that I'd love everybody to go look at. You can learn more about the trio there. So, two questions. Tell us where we can find you, and then also tell us what you're most excited about working on right now.
Cool. You can find us online, amitytrio.com. All of our music is up there online for free and has a whole list of all the different projects that we're working on. I think what we're most excited about right now is, I don't know if we talked about it today, but we have a collaboration with North Slam, our composer in residence. And so the first big collaboration we did was an opera called Lucretia, which is about dinosaurs. And it's an opera for kids. And so we've since turned it into animated shorts. And so they're a little called interstitial episodes. They're a minute long. You can find them on our website as well. But there's 20 of them, and they're currently airing on WTIU, which is a PBS affiliate in Indiana. And they're also on YouTube. So if you want to go check them out, they're amazing. And that's us doing all the puppeteering and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really fun, like, interdisciplinary project. The second project we're doing with Norris Lim is called Oliverso, and it's about like it's part of the larger project we had called Border Crossings. And this opera is about space pirates and this brave astronaut Olive trying to find a new home where people are kind and considerate, and so they travel from planet to planet. And so that's a full-length opera where we've premiered already, the live stage production, and we're doing a tour of that in Mexico City, among other things. But right now we're making it into an animated film. So part one of that was recording it, which we've done the audio recording. Part two is we've made a video game that kids can play online for free. And so that should be done in the next couple months. And we're in the midst of the grant writing stage of making it into an animated film. So right now we're meeting with animators and talking about this next project, which we'll probably be doing for a few years. But it's really exciting to see this music that we brought to life just go out into the world in so many different ways.
That's so exciting. I knew about the puppet opera. I didn't know about the second one. That was when I was really hoping that you would talk about that.
Yeah.
And we can find all of this and information about all of this on your website. Yes?
Yep.
Great. And we'll also try to links, maybe some links to those YouTubes in the thumbnail at the end of this interview too, so people can find you.
That
Uh,
sounds good.
awesome. Well, Dr. Walker, thanks so much. Give Katie my best and Kimberly my best. And thanks for coming on today.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.